It was a cold November night in Ohio, the kind that carried a sharp chill through the air and made the bare trees sway against the wind. Inside our home, the fire crackled warmly in the living room, spreading a soft golden glow across the walls. I had just finished preparing dinner, meatloaf with mashed potatoes, Michael's favorite, and called everyone to the table. James came in from the garage, smelling faintly of sawdust from the shelves he'd been working on, while Emily bounded down the stairs, her laughter ringing through the house. But Michael didn't come right away. He was 17 now, my oldest, and lately I had noticed how quiet he'd become. Once the life of every dinner conversation, now his smile seemed strained, his eyes heavy with thoughts he wouldn't share. When he finally joined us, he barely touched his food, pushing the mashed potatoes around his plate as if lost somewhere else. I wanted to ask him what was wrong, but I knew my son. Michael always needed time. After dinner, James went back to his project in the garage, and Emily started her homework. But I noticed Michael still standing in the kitchen, rinsing his plate far slower than usual. I walked over and gently placed a hand on his arm. "You okay, sweetheart?" I asked softly. He didn't look at me at first. His jaw tightened before he gave a small nod. Can we talk upstairs?" There was something in his voice that made my chest tighten. Not casual, but heavy, trembling, almost like a plea. I nodded and followed him upstairs. He led me to his room and closed the door. The silence that filled the space felt thick, pressing between us. Michael sat on the edge of his bed, his hands twisting together. "Mom," he began quietly, "there's something I've been keeping inside for a while, and I can't anymore. I need to tell you everything." I sat beside him and placed my hand gently over his. "Whatever it is, you can tell me. You don't have to carry it alone." For a long moment, he said nothing. His shoulders trembled, and I realized he was holding back tears. Then, in a voice that broke my heart, he whispered, "I feel like I'm failing, Mom. At everything." "Failing?" I repeated softly, taken aback. "Michael, you're one of the hardest working kids I know. Where is this coming from?" He rubbed his eyes, letting out a humorless laugh. "At school, I feel like I'm drowning. My grades aren't good enough for the colleges everyone expects me to get into. Coach says I'm not pushing hard enough on the field. And some of my friends barely talk to me anymore. I keep pretending everything's fine, but inside..." He paused, his voice cracking. "Inside, I feel empty. Like I'm letting everyone down. Dad, you, Emily, myself." Tears burned my eyes. Every early morning he'd left for practice. Every late night studying. It all made sense now. He wasn't just working hard. He was punishing himself, chasing an impossible standard. "Oh, Michael," I whispered, wrapping my arms around him. He didn't resist. He buried his face against my shoulder, like he used to when he was little. "You're not failing. You're human. You're my son, and you don't have to be perfect to make us proud." His body shook as he cried. "But what if I don't make it into a good college? What if I'm not good enough for the team? What if I just end up being nothing?" I pulled back to look into his tear-filled eyes. "Listen to me, Michael James Carter. You will never be nothing. Who you are isn't defined by grades or soccer or achievements. It's defined by your heart, by how kind you are, by how much you care, by how hard you keep trying even when it hurts. We don't love you for what you do. We love you for who you are." For a long time he sat quietly, letting my words sink in. Then, in a trembling voice, he said, "I was so scared to tell you. I thought you'd be disappointed." "Disappointed?" I shook my head, my throat tight. "The only thing that would ever disappoint me is if you went through something like this alone and felt like you couldn't come to me. You never have to carry that fear again. I'm always here. Always." He nodded slowly, wiping his face with the back of his hand. Sitting beside him, I realized he wasn't just my son anymore. In that moment, I saw the man he was becoming, vulnerable, brave enough to speak his truth, strong enough to face his pain. That night changed everything. After Michael opened up, James and I made it a point to check in with him every day, not about grades or sports, but about how he was really feeling. Emily, though younger, noticed the difference too. She began leaving him little notes of encouragement, slipping them into his backpack or tucking them under his pillow. Our home shifted into something softer, a place where silence wasn't mistaken for strength. and tears weren't seen as weakness. Michael started seeing the school counselor, and slowly, he began to release the crushing expectations he had placed on himself. His grades improved, not because he pushed harder, but because he stopped tearing himself apart. On the soccer field, he rediscovered joy, playing for the love of the game rather than fear of failure. Months later, when college letters began to arrive, he was nervous, but calm.